called Grief and Loss. We actually don't have vocabulary. Our vocabulary isn't, we haven't thought up vocabulary for true deep emotions. We use love and we use sad, and if someone is to say, no, how do you really feel about, let's say, the death of my daughters? There actually isn't words. And so that's one of the reasons that there's ceremony and ritual and lighting candles, or in each of your own ways, finding a way to connect to something bigger. I say that because as I speak tonight, there's probably going to be some words that might trigger you. Please know they're just words. For example, my mother does not like the word loss. When we have a workshop coming up in a few weeks called Loss of a Child. And she doesn't like that because her son, my brother, he died, and she goes, he's not lost. I know exactly where he is. And to someone else, that's a better word than death of a child. Well, also, his body was the only body found in that shipwreck. So the other people were truly lost. So when we're speaking in this room, please know that words are going to have different stingers as well as lollipops and everything else in between for people. And so just, I apologize in advance that there will be some word that probably triggers you. But if we can all realize we're coming from that realm of trying to speak from the alma, speak from the heart. And so just knowing that can help us with different ways as we're speaking. And I always think the trick is not to get caught in a word, but then just flip it to a word that works for you. Because our brain always wants to jump out. And so if all of a sudden I don't like those shoes, instead of the feeling I have, I can be like, you make more money than me, dude. You got on tennis shoes. So we try, our brains often try to not sit with this because it doesn't feel comfortable. So I'm going to speak as quickly as I can for the next 45 minutes, and we will get out on time. I'll lie. We'll probably get out 2 minutes late, but I stay as close as I can. So what's been interesting to learn over the years is just what the brain does in loss. And tonight there's a lot of the loss that we talked about was death. The loss comes in all sorts of forms and all different times. So it can be the loss of time, it can be the loss of innocence. The loss of innocence does not have to mean virginity. That was a religious piece that slowly came in over the decades. Loss of innocence is any time that I thought the world was safe and now it's not as safe as I thought it was. It could be the loss of virginity. It can be the loss of hair. It can be menopause. It can be menopause. It can be retirement. And it can also be things that we don't usually think about, such as happy moments, such as graduating or going off to college or having a baby or getting married. These also have a grief process because there's loss. The loss of who I used to be. So I think of loss as any time the definition of my reality, my foundation of how I define myself has been shaped, rocked, decimated, totally destroyed, whatever it is, and I have to redefine myself, I go through a grief process. In that, I usually have a decrease or the loss of the illusion of safety. And the illusion of safety just means the world's not as quite as safe as I used to think it was. So everything, because we're hypervigilant, then becomes a little more dangerous. We depend on that illusion of safety. Most people here started their cars today. So they put a little spark on some gasoline and had an explosion so that the wheels would go around. But we don't like to think of it that way, because that wouldn't feel very safe. So in the midst of loss, we also have the loss of our illusion of safety. So grief is rebuilding that foundation and redefining me into the present. So I'm caught in the past of who I used to be, overwhelmed by the future, and the two collide and I'm in a free fall. And so the work is to start to honor this loss so I can start moving more and more into the present. And in that, the future doesn't have to be quite as overwhelming, and rebuild that foundation. And then step into the next part of my life. So that's really what grief is. Loss, very bluntly, is an amputation. A piece of me has been cut off. And if it was a bodily amputation, I would then be in the hospital. I would then be in the recovery room. I'd be protected by medical people. I wouldn't see too many people, and I'd slowly reintegrate into the world, and then I'd go get my prosthesis, and then I'd have that work with me, and then I'd go to rehab, and then even over time I'd still need to go in and get certain maintenance done. And what they've shown is people actually, some of the people who've had the loss of a leg with all that work can actually end up running quicker with their prosthesis. That's not sugarcoating it, but it shows how our quality can actually continue forward. But in an emotional loss, this has been disenfranchised to the level that we don't do any of that. When my daughters died, I was offered 3 days of bereavement leave. So of course I quit teaching school because there was no way I was going to walk into a classroom. And so that's how our society has done these pieces, is we have forgotten about this thing called grief, the recovery room. And so over the last 10 years especially, we've learned so much about the brain that it's making more and more sense, which can give us more and more permission to realize we aren't sick and we're not crazy, it's not forever, and we're not alone. And that can mean so much in helping with the healing process. So if this is, I'm going to kind of stand in front of you, okay? I'm not ignoring you. This is my life. I have many events, including being born. And then different things happen on my life. Good, bad, in between, but I have events that help me develop and move into the next steps and phases of my life. And then I have a new loss. What our body does in our psyche is pretty interesting. Emotionally, I regress to a very young age. Emotionally, I partially do that due to my psyche goes, oh good, I have a chance to look at anything else that feels similar and try to work on that at the same time. So emotionally, we become 2 or 3 years old as we're working with our loss, because all of our autonomy is gone. I feel naked. Cognitively, I also regress to a very young age. I regress to a very young age here because the brain is looking for things in the past that have helped me with a similar feeling. So when I was 12 or 13 years old, my buddy's dad killed himself. He was quite a role model for me. And so all of a sudden, if I have another loss, I might go right to that time period. Well, we stole a bunch of 6-packs of beers. We went and sat in the truck and drank them all and threw up all over the truck. And but my brain's going to go, hey, I lived that moment. So hopefully we can override some of these things to glean the things that actually truly helped. Now play out the rest of that story. We got grounded. We had to clean the acequia to raise money so we could pay for those beers. And we had to go apologize to the people. So it didn't really help. But my brain is trying to find anything to help me survive that moment. So it's gleaning these two pieces. As we move forward, we start to move back into our present. Now, if we have other losses, we have delayed grief, we kind of get blocked up into here. And so, in this process, we're healing old wounds that may be there. Now, the bummer is, life is still going on. The bills are still in the mailbox, other pieces are happening, truly the acequias need to start being cleaned now, and pieces of our world still are moving forward. But we have this huge gap of where this was and where we're supposed to be. Grief is this process. of moving up to the present. The bummer is I wish it looked so nice like that battery. It looks more like this. And then if I have anything that distracts me on certain levels, it looks more like this. And actually, we've kind of been taught to not do grief, so we get caught in this piece. My goal for myself as well as others is that, yeah, we don't have a clean path, but through the grief process, we redefine ourselves so we're in the present. So what happens is we're still going to have other losses. And the hope is, if I've been doing my grief work, when I have this new loss, and I regress back to this area, instead of being captured by this loss, I can glean the wisdom from that loss that now can help me in this present situation. So I have scars of wisdom rather than gaping wounds that pull us back. Now, if we have, which is becoming a common term, post-traumatic stress disorder, or known as PTSD, this is a great way of explaining that, even to myself, is I am going to regress back to an early age or an old wound. And I'm cognitively going to go back as well. If this wound captures me, that's where I'm caught in a PTSD situation. We were talking about this, I don't remember who with today, but about different triggers that will still pull us back. That doesn't have to mean they capture us. So my daughters were hit by a trash truck. And so even today, 20 years later, if I see a trash truck, I can get yanked back. But I've done the work so that the frequency, intensity, and duration doesn't hold me there. So the whole idea is to be able to start to glean here to help us in the present situation. And what they've learned about the brain is the brain literally starts to shut down. After a loss, my brain starts to shut way down. Now that they can do all those colors and look at the brain. And part of that's because I'm trying to survive. So it moves more into my limbic system in order to survive, which is fight, flight, freeze, fornicate, feast, or lack of those. So there's parts of my pathways that shut way, way down because they just don't matter in survival mode. So it's very similar to a traumatic brain injury. So there's a good chance I'll have high impulsivity, high irritability, hypersensitivity, and loss of short-term memory. If I'm falling down the well, I really don't care what CNN has to say about Trump today. In other words, grief, early loss and early grief is all about me. It's actually pretty narcissistic in that moment because I'm just trying to survive. I really don't care what's going on over here because I'm falling and I'm looking for pieces to start to hold on to. But in this piece, we can get really scared. So when one of our young people died a while back, I knew we'd have a lot of young people coming out to Golden Willow. And so I was like, oh man, we're going to probably have 100 people out here. I'm really sad. This sucks. This is a bummer. But I better go for a run. So I drove into town to go to the gym to run because it was 4:30 in the morning. And I actually drove all the way to the office and I was like, what was I going to do? I was like, oh yeah, because I had my gym clothes on. So I remembered. If that had happened, well, it did happen in other ways, back before I knew this, I would have thought I was crazy. I would have thought I was stupid. I thought it was ridiculous. And I would have thought all these things rather than, oh, this is a natural, normal part of the healing process from a loss. Those pieces shut down. So I went to the gym and didn't feel like a dork, and I don't mind feeling like a dork, but didn't feel like a dork, and I was able to do my run rather than think, oh my goodness, I've lost my mind and it's forever. So knowing this is really huge. Now, in that limbic system, we talk about fight and flight and freeze a lot. And I see freeze as when fight and flight collide and can't do either. Please know fight doesn't have to mean I'm doing this. You guys actually use fight to get here. There's something I gotta do. I'm gonna take some movements. I'm gonna walk through these doors and I'm gonna go see this goofball named Ted and we're gonna talk about grief. So we often think of fight just meaning war. It's also how am I fighting for my life. Freeze, I believe, is where grief lives because we stop. Fornicate and feast have their peace because in this time period, my brain thinks I'm dying. So I need to eat a lot, maybe try to make a lot of babies, feast, or run, or go away. In other words, my brain naturally, I look at these candles, and I look at the candles and it's, can they eat me? Can I eat them? Can we make a baby? And we do that all the time. But as humans, we get embarrassed to realize we do that. We do it so quickly and then we go to our frontal lobe and go, wow, isn't that a beautiful set of candles? But we're in that place. There's another piece I like to bring up quickly is we can also have what I call a viral trip. And that's medicate. All the addictive tendencies. It lives in that part of the brain as well. And so I'm going to find ways to try to relieve the pain I'm having. And so it's very easy to turn into addictive tendencies. That was most of the work I did at Betty Ford Center. So being aware of that just can be a good piece. And if someone has addiction issues or is in recovery or is even contemplating needing that, being aware of that can help. So this goes on. Knowing that TBI is there, that we are going to regress no matter how much we know. Luckily, I don't mind, but luckily I'm not caught in, if I have another loss, I know I'm going to do this rather than, I'm supposed to know this stuff, I shouldn't have to do it. No. So I know I'm going to regress, I'm going to take care of myself, it's not the best time to make big decisions and that sort of things, even though sometimes the universe makes us make those decisions. But I'm going to take time in the recovery room and start stepping back into my life again and let myself realize how I've been redefined by the situation. So one of my losses is I ditched 6th, 7th grade a lot. And so 7th period was art. So I didn't go to art very often, so that's a boat. And someone in here, I forgot who it was, said, nuh-uh, it's a teacup. But that doesn't work as well for my metaphor. So that's a boat. And Ed Sandoval was my art teacher, who's on the plaza now, so we can blame him. But so please have this be a boat, and you can picture it as a better boat. So it's my boat of life, your boat of life. So we're born, and we have this boat, our boat of life, and we start to have losses. And so, even in utero, we have losses. So, mama's pregnant with me, and maybe there's domestic violence. Maybe she watches a scary movie. Maybe she trips. Maybe she has some bad beans and has gas. Inside, in my little comfort zone, I'm going, whoa, whoa! And my cells are remembering that. Mama didn't do anything. I'm not blaming my mom for anything. It's just what happens. So that safety I had, and we call it a startled reflex. We get older and we call it a free fall because it'd be kind of weird to be like, dude, yesterday when I was skiing, and I had that startled reflex after going off the... He probably wouldn't ski me with me anymore. So we changed it to being cool and we call it a free fall, but it's that same piece. And then we're born. Most of us don't remember that. Congratulations. But all of a sudden we have to pee and poop and breathe for ourselves, and hopefully we get good care. But that process changes us radically, and there's a whole other piece. We don't remember this, but our cells do. And we have cellular memory that's locking that in. Then we get a little bit older, and maybe our diaper wasn't changed right when we wanted it to be. Maybe we weren't taken out of the crib right when we wanted to be. I remember so well with my first wife, Leslie, and I, way before cell phones, over at Baca Park, and Carrie finally was sitting up, good old 5 months old. So we took her down to Baca Park and we put her on the bench and we backed up to take her picture, and what did she do? Boom, 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 fell off the bench. Okay. She didn't start crying until she saw Leslie and I going, ah! Now she didn't trust us, we didn't trust us, and so even those pieces, natural, innocent pieces happen that get put into that situation. And then there is abuse, sexual, physical, emotional abuse that happens at any time in our life. And then we get a little bit older, maybe our pet dies. And then we get a little bit older, and all of a sudden we're doing so well with this hold the boat that they send me off to preschool. And everyone's going, yay! And I'm going, no! And no one told me I couldn't eat all the cookies out of all the different lunch bags. And no one told me that I had to come in when the bell rang. But aha, I'll just stay out in the sand pile a little bit longer. But then I didn't know that I wouldn't be able to go to the bathroom, so I pee my pants. And then I'm not invited to the birthday parties because I'm the pants peer. And then I've done so well in preschool, they let me know that also in kindergarten I get to go all day long. And so I get teased. And maybe there's a divorce in here. Maybe there's getting beat up. Whatever there is, by about age 10, 11, 12, we've already had so many losses. And developmentally, we don't really work with these losses. Grief for children is very different. And so we just kind of put it aside and keep goofing off and getting teased, all these different things. And then about 5th or 6th grade, maybe my body starts changing or it doesn't start changing. One thing I found, I work usually with one young woman a year who has an eating disorder, who's on that verge of dying. Usually her heart has started to shut down, her pancreas is shutting down. And with the team, I'll work with them. And what I found with all 9 of these young women I've worked with so far, 5th or 6th grade, they were bullied. You know, I've already got my doctorate, and I'm not going to do that kind of research ever again. But it's very interesting that so far the 9 people I've worked with, bullying was such a big part of that issue. So I get bullied. And then all of a sudden, I get a little bit older, so I run over and I'm like, Mary, will you go to the dance with me? And Mary goes, what's that big red thing on your nose? I go, I got a pimple! And so I go running off. I've abandoned Mary, Mary's abandoned me, and we both have loss. In other words, we don't know what to do with these bodies, and we don't know what to do with these pieces, and we're totally being redefined. And so that piece is there. Maybe there's more abuse, maybe we lose our virginity, maybe we don't, maybe we roll a car, maybe we don't, maybe we steal a car, maybe we don't, maybe we take drugs, maybe we don't, maybe we graduate, maybe we don't, but by the age of 18, for most of us, the hull of the boat is full. Now, to let all the mamas and daddies off the hook, it really doesn't matter. We can't be the perfect parent and say, my child is going to have an empty hull of a boat. We're going to have loss. We have the loss of a day. We have the loss of dreams. We have geographical losses. Hopefully, as parents, we give the opportunity that someone can say, hey, will you guys come support me at a grief group tonight? So hopefully we're teaching our young people, I know one young person who's got a high emotional intelligence, to be able to speak and try to identify and communicate about feelings. But we don't get to keep the hole empty. So then, this is about full. And we go out and we start the next step of our life, whatever that means, and we have another loss. I better use my tie tonight, huh? So, we're going to use my puppy dog Mai Tai. It seems so appropriate. So Mai Tai was my puppy dog that Leslie and I got when we turned 20 and 21. We were just getting to get married because we were so ancient in age. And we were going to get this puppy dog. Well, we got married and we went on a honeymoon up on the Conejos River. And we stayed at this really cool little cabin. Well, the bed, when he laid on it, it went like this. So we were like, oh well, so we threw it on the floor and we were going to sleep on the floor. And all of a sudden the squirrels and mice started running across us. So we said, well, that's kind of chingered, so let's take it outside. So we throw it outside and we just sleep outside. We got a few mosquito bites, but we were used to that anyways. We came home, we thought it was a great honeymoon. We're Tasteños, you know, that's just a good day. We got to get out of town. I didn't have to do construction for a couple days. Well, a friend heard about this and was kind of horrified. So he talked to his parents and they sent us to Hawaii. Mm-hmm. And so we got to have a honeymoon in Hawaii. And it was almost as good as the Conejos River. But we learned about this thing called Mai Tais. And you could sit at sunset and drink Mai Tais. So we thought it was so cool, we brought it back. And we continued. So we get our little puppy dog. And we're sitting there having our Mai Tai. And this little puppy dog comes over, knocks over my drink, laps it all up and begs for more. So voila, she's named Mai Tai. So Mai Tai was a big part of our rites of passage of becoming adults. Luckily, we weren't having children at that time, but we started with Mai Tai. Well, Mai Tai ended up being there when I got cryptosporidiosis and almost died. Mai Tai had gone skiing with Richard and I right before he left to Alaska and then died. Mai Tai was so amazing with Carrie that Carrie would crawl over and spoon with Mai Tai, and Mai Tai wouldn't move and Carrie would fall asleep. We didn't have much money, so we had a pretty cold house. So Carrie would just fall asleep on Mai Tai's belly. Well, that was okay. And then Amy came along, and Carrie had already claimed the spot of the belly. So Amy would crawl over and try to take Mai Tai's eyeball out. And Mai Tai would look at me like, dude, now you gotta help me. Come on, this isn't right. Well, Mai Tai was definitely there when Leslie got sick. I could just pet Mai Tai and be like, how am I going to take care of a 1 and a 3-year-old and have a sick wife who actually kind of took care of me on a lot of levels? So Mai Tai could just be there and hold that space for me. After Leslie died, Mai Tai became the most amazing nanny. If one of the girls started to get out of the parking lot, Mai Tai would walk sideways and push him back into the park, push him back into the park and back into our yard. Mai Tai would always be there. So of course, when Carrie and Amy and Rachel died, Mai Tai died about 2 months after that, along with Carrie's horse Misty. And I tell you that story not about me, but showing all these different triggers that are now part of Mai Tai's death. What happens is the emotions go down into the hull of my boat and start tickling, connecting to these other files. Those files connect to other files. So all of a sudden I'm thinking about Duke, who was my dog, our dog when I was 2. Or Midnight, my high school dog that must have saved my life so many times. Oh my goodness, high school on Blueberry Hill, that's a wild day. And so all these others are connected. This I can't prove, but I believe so deeply. I don't believe our emotional world actually has the stories. It has feelings that then go up to my brain and categorize into the stories. So Mai Tai's death goes to all of these pieces that go, oh good, I have a chance to be released. And so all of these other parts are part of my present story, which does not disenfranchise Mai Tai in any way. I still have a hard time for myself more than anyone else, but I do use this word very carefully. So one of the gifts Mai Tai gives me is the chance to heal many things that I might not even know I'm healing. Now some of these, through somatic release, and just having a chance to be released through Mai Tai, just go out the bottom. Others are large and need to be identified. Most people, when they have a loss, they start thinking about their old historical losses. But in honoring and grieving consciously grieving Mai Tai, I start to release some of that distress because our body's trying to get to a natural state. It doesn't mean I forget. Some things I'd love to forget, but I don't have that choice. But it's released and allows for me the opportunity to transform all of that into the winds that now push my sails forward and push my boat forward. So that's what the grief process allows us to do. I actually get a little nervous giving this talk because it makes it sound like it's all okay. There's no sugar in grief or loss. It's very blunt, it's very real, it's very sad. And like I said, it doesn't mean grief makes it all better or I forgot. It still sucks. I was skiing with a boy that Leslie and I, my first wife, helped raise, who actually lived with us, and we were up on the top of the mountain and we were talking about Leslie. And we both said, and we miss her every day. And yet we so much were enjoying the mountain. So what grief does allow us is to sit with such huge dichotomies. I received a text from a woman on my birthday saying happy birthday in her own way, whose husband hadn't died too much earlier. And there was a piece that's so sad of how I got to meet her and so grateful that she's now part of my life. So grief allows us to walk with these huge dichotomies and expand our brain way past where we used to be able to have it go. And so unlike a traumatic brain injury, where the worst is the beginning and at some point it stops, in emotional trauma and moving through that emotional TBI, the worst is the beginning, and yet from there we have the opportunity to move way past wherever we used to be emotionally. Because we learn how to walk with these incredible dichotomies. It sucks any of you, including myself, are here. And I'm so grateful this is here so we can have a place to do this. So we walk with these pieces that we bridge and expand our brain way past where it used to be. Olivia Newton-John did an album a couple years ago, and one of the songs is for parents who have had children die. And she had some of us write some articles for her. And I picked a difficult research topic, but luckily I found the information from the 80s actually, and there's not much after that. It really showed most